there is one thing about the Ripper documentary that I could not stand. So I'm going to get that out of the way, and then the rest of this discussion is going to be very positive, because I actually found that the 4-part documentary on Netflix was actually really insightful, very informative, very engaging, very well delivered, slightly biased, but generally a really enjoyable watch. So I'm not going to spoil anything if you are not familiar with how Peter Sutcliffe was caught or how he killed his victims. I'm not going to give any of that away. Okay, so the one negative thing, in the 3rd episode, the 3rd of 4, there are some women who are being interviewed, and they go on and on about how they fought back, and there were these marches about reclaiming the night or resisting the night or whatever it was, how they weren't going to listen to the police and they were going to go out at night on their own, even if this Yorkshire Ripper was going around. They weren't going to listen to these men. And I just think you're an absolute idiot. And I'm speaking as a feminist. I'm a pretty diehard feminist, but these women were just stupid. It's like the people today who go around wearing masks just because they think it violates their freedom. But really, if these women were clever and smart, they would have listened and thought, yeah, actually, I should be allowed my freedom, but it's not worth the risk of my life or the grief that my death or injury would put my family and friends under. So they were very selfish, very stupid, and I nearly almost skipped past that 3rd episode. But I didn't. I powered through it, and thankfully the 4th episode ended on a pretty powerful high. So the documentary does, of course, document Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, and the victims that he killed in the late 70s, and then takes us up to the 4th episode where we find out how he was captured. And I have to say, I didn't know how he was captured. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to watch this, because while I was basically aware of how he killed his victims and the locations in which he did so, I wasn't actually aware of his downfall, I guess, of the thing that caused him to be caught. And I'm not going to spoil it, but it's pretty, after 5.5 years of roaming the streets and murdering people, it's pretty incredible to think of how he was caught. And the documentary does look at police incompetence, and there are a lot of people who think that the West Yorkshire police didn't do enough, and I think that that's utter rubbish. I do think they could have done things differently, but when you have to make a decision and take a case in a certain direction, you may make the wrong decision, and it's awful, and it's horrific, and nobody wishes that had happened. But police were working with the information that they had, and if anybody knows anything about policing, they'll know that that's all you can do, and you have to make an informed decision, and sometimes you make the wrong decision, and it has tragic results. But so I think the documentary leaned too heavily into that. But at the same time, I can see kind of where they're coming from, in the sense that it did take 5.5 years, and there were maybe 1 or 2 people in charge of the police force at the time who didn't perform their best. But for the most part, it's completely disgusting to sweep all of the officers under the rug and brandish them the same. So that did annoy me as well, but that wasn't so much the documentary's fault, that was more just a couple of the idiots who were talking in this. There was a lot of, there are a lot of very unreasonable people here. I understand they're frustrated, but they don't see that the police are actually human beings who can make mistakes. If they should be attacking anybody, it should be the Yorkshire Ripper, not the people who fought tirelessly around the clock to try and catch him. One thing that I thought was very odd is that Bruce Jones pops up, Les Battersby from Coronation Street. I'm not going to say why, but I was quite surprised by what he said, and he is the only actor appearance as far as I'm aware. So some of the people we hear from get a little bit irritating, but then we have people like Bruce Jones who tells quite a fascinating account. I wish they'd gone into his story more, because I think he would have had a really insightful take. The documentary itself is very well put together. We have some reconstructions, we have some archive footage, a lot of photographs. We get to see the e-fits, We hear interviews with a lot of the police officers who were involved in the case at the time, and family and friends of murdered victims, and also some survivors. There's also a heavy strain on prostitutes, because obviously emulating Jack the Ripper, the Yorkshire Ripper did murder some supposed prostitutes, but it opens up that for discussion. It doesn't make any strict claims about the nighttime habits of these women, and it does open that up quite a bit. It doesn't say anything conclusive, which I think, where it's biased in some ways, in, you know, giving women who are just defiant a voice and saying that the police did a bad job, it does actually balance out a little bit by not saying either way about whether or not Sutcliffe was just targeting prostitutes. I think it's a very interesting documentary. If we ignore some of the bias, it's very educational, and the facts are all there. They're presented in a very engaging way. I learned an awful lot, and because I can ignore some of the bias, I just used it as an educational platform rather than somewhere to receive the opinions of other people about the case. I just needed the facts. The facts were there. I enjoyed the facts, very fascinated by them. As I said, it's only 4 parts, and each one's maybe just shy of an hour. So it's a good chunk of time to really get stuck in and really enjoy it. I think if you know nothing about the Yorkshire Ripper, I think you'd be able to get on very well with it. I don't think you need any level of knowledge before this. But if you know a little bit as a foundation, then obviously you'll probably be able to get a lot more out of it and build on existing knowledge. The documentary is exceptionally timely. This was released, I believe, the 16th of December. And Sutcliffe died the month before, in November. So I don't know if they very quickly put this together or if their timing is just impeccable. But certainly, if you want to watch it, now is the perfect time to do so. I watched it in 2 sittings. I watched the first 2 episodes, then I watched the second 2. I thoroughly enjoyed them. If ever I want to write anything about Sutcliffe or explore his mind more, this is certainly a starting point that I will go to. I'd like to think there'll be a companion book. That would be incredible. But for now, I'm quite content with the 4 episodes. I did thoroughly enjoy them. I definitely recommend them on Netflix. And I was going to say something and it completely went out of my head. Let's just pretend that wasn't an important thing. I think it's an absolutely brilliant series. Not perfect. It does have its flaws, namely some of the people being interviewed, and they're very selfish. Very, very selfish, defiant, I'll do what I like attitudes. But for the most part, absolutely brilliant. Definitely check it out.